Hey, what's going on, DDO and LOTRO players? Axel here. So, some really big news broke this week. EG7, which is a company out of Stockholm, Sweden, acquired Daybreak Games, which Daybreak is a company out of San Diego, California, which includes, among other game studios, Standing Zone Games, who, of course, operates DDO and LOTRO. So as a part of this acquisition, EG7 released a investors presentation which included all kinds of juicy player data, revenue data for DDO and LOTRO, which is really exciting to see. I mean, this is information that I've been wanting to see for years, which is, as far as I know, has never been released because SSG has kept this quite private, but EG7 has released a lot of information in this investors report. We're going to go over all the highlights of this information, which is really, really cool and really interesting. But before I do that, I think I need to hop over to the forums and discuss this acquisition first and SSG's statement on this acquisition. So here is what Severlin, the executive producer of DDO, said on the DDO forums. I'm sure he said something similar on the LOTRO forums as well, but here's his statement. Greetings. As our players have read, EG7, a nod Global 7, entered into an agreement to acquire 100% of the shares in Daybreak Games Company today. We are excited about EG7 and we welcome them into our family. We are also excited to be part of such a great collaboration. We just wanted to let our players know that this will have no impact on the development of DDO, LOTRO, and operations for us at SSG. Our teams are working as hard as always to bring new and exciting things to our games in the months and years to come. We've been encouraged by your support this year and we're hard at work planning 2021 and beyond. We'll have a more forward-looking producer's letter in the new year, and that is where we'll talk about our next classic pack, a new event, and a whole lot more. From everyone at Standing Stone Games, we wish you and yours well throughout the rest of the season and holidays around the world. So pretty much a blanket statement there. I mean, he's saying that this is not going to have any impact on the game. And I don't think that's quite true. And we'll talk about that a little later. I think the main purpose of this statement, though, is just players tend to freak out about this kind of stuff and think, oh, doom, oh my God, the game's going to end or something like that. I think this statement is just something that they put out just to reassure players that this acquisition doesn't mean that DDO or LOTRO is ending or anything like that. But as far as it having no impact, I'm not sure if that's true because it seems to be a little bit contradictory from what EG7 is saying in their investors presentation, which we'll jump over to now. But one other thing I want to note, he mentioned here that there's going to be a new event for DDO. I'm not going to discuss that in this video, maybe in a future video, but that is some news we hadn't heard prior. So let's now jump over into EG7's investor presentation and look at some of this data. Okay, we're now back over here at the investor presentation from EG7. I'm not going to go over every single page of this. I will link their website below where you can acquire and look at this whole presentation if you want. But I'm going to go through the highlights and the most relevant information for LOTRO and DDO specifically. So here on page 15 of the presentation, this is where we see the most interesting data. So we see direct revenue and player data for both DDO and LOTRO, among, of course, Daybreak's other games like EverQuest and DC Universe, PlanetSide. But as far as DDO and LOTRO, so as you can see here on the screen, DDO has 6.9 year-to-date bookings. So what does that mean exactly? So year-to-date, as defined on this presentation, is from January 1st of 2020 through September of 2020. So that is revenue just for that period. In bookings, you have to define that. Bookings is a little different from revenue. So bookings means a commitment from a customer to spend money. So for example, say someone like pre-orders something, that would be in a commitment to spend money, not necessarily spending money. So it's a little bit different, but it's in the same ballpark as, say, revenue. So DDO has 6.9 million in year-to-date bookings. LOTRO has more than that. LOTRO has 9.9 million in year-to-date bookings. Okay, when it comes to the members in MAU, so this is quite exciting. So MAU, this means monthly active users. So DDO has 46,000 monthly active users. LOTRO has 108,000 monthly active users. So LOTRO is a little bit more has about a little more than double the player base of DDO, really about 2.5 times the player base of DDO. Okay, and when it comes to the members, so members on this presentation is defined as customers who have purchased a subscription. So these are basically your VIPs. So DDO has 22,000 of those, 22,000 VIPs, whereas LOTRO has 41,000. So that's really interesting. We've never really been told exactly how much money DDO and LOTRO makes. And just to be aware, this is not a full year of earnings. This is just, again, 9 months because it's January through September. When you break down this data, it actually shows a very interesting story here. So DDO has only 43% of the monthly active users as LOTRO, but brings in 70% of LOTRO's revenue. So basically what that means is LOTRO has more than double DDO's player base, but DDO brings in much more money per player. So that's very interesting. And we'll talk a little bit more about this below. There's some charts here that show this in more detail here. So let's move it down to page 16 here, which Page 16 shows Daybreak's games by what percentage of the company's revenue each game makes up. So as you can see, this is kind of Daybreak's whole portfolio here. So there's bookings by game, which we've already described what bookings is. There's EBITDA by games, which that means earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization. So as you can see here, for DDO and LOTRO, they're one of the smaller, I guess you could say, parts of the portfolio, but still a substantial percentage. I mean, most of it's DC Universe Online, DDO being about 10% of the bookings and LOTRO 14%. So yeah, that's pretty interesting to see just kind of what size of, when it comes to Daybreak, what portion these games make up. So let's continue now. We're going to go down to page 17 here, which shows some interesting metrics. So one interesting thing is they're claiming the average session hours are up to 5. This is something the CEO talked about in the presentation a little bit more, but basically he's saying that the average session is up to 5 hours. So that's really surprising. I can't believe that it's that high. Like, that seems really, really high. I don't know how that number is calculated exactly, but they're saying the average session for these games is up to 5. So that doesn't mean DDO specifically or LOTRO specifically, but it means that customers are spending a lot of time. When they do sit down to play, they play for a long time. So that's kind of interesting to look at. Okay, next here, we're looking at the average monthly ARPPU. So what that means is the ARPPU is the average revenue per playing customer, which we kind of talked about before with DDO bringing in much more money per player than LOTRO. So look at the chart here. It's not even close. Like, DDO is absolutely way higher than all of the other Daybreak games in terms of how much money is being made per player. So that could be a good or a bad thing if you're a DDO player looking at that. You could say that, oh, that might be a bad thing because DDO's really over monetizing their game. Maybe you think compared to the others, or you might look at this as a positive because you might say that, oh, DDO is very profitable per player, so maybe that might make EG7 want to invest more money into expanding the game further, which could benefit all players. So this statistic could really be a positive or a negative depending on how you want to look at it. But as you can see here on the bottom, the average monthly amount of money made per player from DDO is $65.20. And for LOTRO, it's $51.90. And this is as of the third quarter of 2020. Okay, the next page here is called Highly Tenured User Cohorts. So what this shows is where revenue comes from in terms of veteran players versus newer players. So the red area here represents revenue from players that have been playing for 3+ years. So this shows basically what we all known already. I mean, the bulk of the revenue is coming from veteran players for both Lord of the Rings and DDO. So DDO, around 76% of the revenue comes from veteran players, defined as players playing 3+ years, and for LOTRO, it is about 80%. Okay, here on page 19 is a section called Robust Growth Opportunities. So this shows some really interesting information, particularly for LOTRO, and as far as I know, a first announcement or reveal. But some of you guys who play LOTRO more, I don't play LOTRO really at all. So those of you who do play LOTRO, let me know if this has been announced before. But here in the LOTRO section, they talk about LOTRO upgrades. They say planning visual and technical updates for LOTRO for PC and next-gen consoles to capitalize on Amazon's highly publicized large investment in Lord of the Rings TV series. So for those of you who don't know, Amazon has announced a Lord of the Rings series for their Amazon Prime subscription service, And as part of that, that presents an opportunity for LOTRO to expand more, because it's going to be the IP is going to be more in the kind of the face of the public. So that's going to mean more people are going to likely try Lord of the Rings Online as part of that. So that presents a growth opportunity. As part of that, they've announced what looks like a next-gen console port for Lord of the Rings Online. So I'm assuming that would be, they say next-gen, so I'm assuming that means a port to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. So if that's what's going to happen, I mean, maybe they also mean Nintendo Switch, I don't know. But in any case, it looks like there's going to be some kind of port. The new Xbox and PlayStation do have mouse and keyboard support. So that would make playing the game much easier. I mean, you can play, I know you can play DDO in particular with a gamepad. I'm assuming the same can be said with LOTRO, but having mouse and keyboard compatibility certainly would make it a much more viable option. So I'm assuming that those are the consoles that would be getting it, but who knows? I can't say for sure. They don't give that detail. Okay, now let's jump back to page 7 to finish this out with the highlights here and talk about EG7 and what they consider their strategy. So what they've said here, and this is where at the beginning when we talked about Severlin's post there talking about how this acquisition will have no impact on DDO and LOTRO. This is where I think it contradicts a little bit here with what Severlin said. So EG7 states that we take the companies we acquire to a new level, and they talk about this a lot in their presentation as well, the actual audio and video presentation, which you can watch on their website. But they talk about how they like to acquire companies and then make them better. So hopefully that's actually not just corporate speak, and they actually mean that. If they actually mean that, then maybe we'll see more investment in LOTRO and DDO. And that's one good thing that could come out of this acquisition, is perhaps more money could be funded from the top towards these games. Maybe we'll see more developers put on board. Maybe we'll see more ambitious expansions, things like that. So hopefully that's what happens. The CEO and co-founder of EG7, Robin Floden, also made statements to this effect in the video presentation to investors. So here's what he had to say. Here's a direct quote. Quote, DC Online, Lord of the Rings, and Dungeons & Dragons are truly some of the larger IPs in the world, and we of course see the possibility of growing these games and their communities going into the future as an extremely exciting proposition. So hopefully the CEO means that literally, and we see more cash funded into LOTRO and DDO, and we see more and cooler things. So hopefully this ownership change at the top here benefits us, but it's really hard to say. I mean, with this happening, we could see we don't really know what's going to happen to the games. I mean, of course, I see no reason that the games would end, anything like that. As we can see here, the games are still quite profitable. So I think when it comes to this acquisition, I think worst case scenario here is we see EG7 just not have much involvement at all with LOTRO and DDO, and those two games just continue doing what they've been doing, and we see no change at all, as Severlin said. Or I think best case scenario, we see EG7 fund DDO and LOTRO more, and we see more expansions, more staff hired on to both of these games. That makes a better game for all of us who actually play them. So hopefully the latter happens, and we see more interesting things happen with these games, and more funding in a bigger team that can get more done in these games and make them better. I think there's more reason to be optimistic for LOTRO. It's just because with the Amazon series coming out, there seems to be more growth opportunities with LOTRO for the company. But it's also just the bigger game in general, even though DDO is more profitable per player. So we'll see. Really, it's tough to say, but we'll see how this impacts the games going forward. But guys, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you think about this. If there's anything you want to add or anything you think I misinterpreted or got wrong, would be interested in reading that below in the comments. That's going to be it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one and take care.